Hello, everyone, and welcome to CBA's At the Bar, a podcast where young and youngish lawyers discuss legal news, events, topics, stories, and, well, whatever else strikes our fancy, really. I'm your host, John Amarillo of Taft, Stettinius and Hollister, and co-hosting the pod with me today is Sally Pazetsky-Steele of Pazetsky and Berliner. Say hello, Sally.
Hi, everyone.
This is Fear and Loathing in the Law. With us today is Mark Cuban. Brian is an authority on body dysmorphic disorder, male eating disorders, and addiction. He's the author of best-selling book Shattered Image, My Triumph Over Body Dysmorphic Disorder. He also writes extensively on these subjects. His columns have appeared on CNN, Fox News, and the Huffington Post, and in online and print newspapers around the world. Cuban speaks regularly about his recovery and breaking the stigma surrounding eating disorders, addiction, mental illness. His newest book, The Addicted Lawyer, Tales of the Bar, Booze, Blow, and Redemption. I love that title, Brian.
Little alliteration there.
Is available on his website, briancuban.com. Brian, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the bar, ironically.
Yes. It's been a nice day in Chicago.
Tell us a little something about your journey.
Well, I am a one-time practicing lawyer. Now, my license hasn't been suspended, and I haven't been disbarred, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. I am in recovery from alcohol and cocaine addiction, and I have been in recovery since April 2007. I grew up in Pittsburgh. I have three brothers. A lot of people know my older brother, Mark. I have a younger brother, Jeff. We all live in Dallas. And my journey has been an interesting one, from trading Dallas Mavericks championship tickets for cocaine.
You mentioned that before.
Yeah,
I gotta tell me that story. What happened there?
Back in June 2006, the Dallas Mavericks were going to the NBA championship for the very first time. And this was before I went into recovery, as you might imagine. I was going to get some pretty good seats for those games, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
I also had the opportunity to get a couple free tickets. Very nice ones for some friends. I took those tickets, and instead of giving them to my friends, I traded them to my drug dealer for $1,000 in cocaine. Twice. Interestingly, I flushed it down the toilet twice.
Is that right?
That was
Yes.
stressful to read.
Not because, yes, I mean, it was stressful to wake up the next day and realize I had flushed now $900 worth of cocaine down the toilet because I had done some. But it was kind of like we call the quote-unquote insanity of addiction. I had even drilled fake electrical outlets in the drywall in my house to take the cocaine and put it in all these little Ziploc baggies to hide it behind all these fake electrical outlets. Like the cops, the DEA, and the drug dogs have never thought of that before, right?
Was your house ever raided by the authorities?
In my mind, it was.
In your mind.
I was very paranoid. In my mind, I heard the cops. I saw the SWAT team coming through my window like at the end of Christmas Vacation.
Oh, wow.
And
that's dramatic.
There's a lot of paranoia with hardcore cocaine addiction.
Yeah, that's a theme throughout your book, is the ongoing sort of constant struggle between I have to get my life together, and because people are always kind of looking over my shoulder, you constantly talk about worrying about other people and the authorities and the police, but something overpowered that, clearly.
Absolutely. That is why we know that addiction is not a choice. And it's interesting, a lot of people get lost in that nuance. Was the first time I did a line of cocaine a choice? Absolutely. That was a choice. It was a choice that was influenced by a lot of environmental factors, a lot of feelings about myself, about self-loathing that go back to childhood, but it was a choice. The biological process of addiction that followed from that was not a choice. Addiction is a disease. I did not do that first line of cocaine in a bathroom in Dallas, Texas, saying, you know what? I'm going to lose my career as a lawyer. I'm going to get divorced 3 times. I'm going to go to jail, and that's great.
Yeah.
And I'm going to love that. It wasn't a choice.
And we should probably start out by saying that this is a problem that a lot of lawyers face, right? There was, I remember a few years ago, a study from the American Bar Association and the Betty Ford Foundation came out. It said 1 in 3 practicing lawyers are problem drinkers, 28% suffer from depression, 19 show symptoms of anxiety. I don't know any lawyers at all that don't show symptoms of anxiety, so I question the study on that regard. 29% of new lawyers, defined as their first 10 years of practice, are problem drinkers. I mean, this is epidemic proportions, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the study was actually just this last February.
Oh, okay.
So, yes.
Yeah.
And actually, the lawyers under 10 years, millennials, I think everyone but me at this table, and which is interesting because the last study, which I believe was in 1990, found that lawyers more my age were the problem drinkers. So it has reversed.
Okay.
And this is a self-reporting thing. I mean, it's probably even worse than
Absolutely.
they say.
Absolutely.
You could ask me and my friends any day, and nobody asked us in that study.
Absolutely. And as to other substances like cocaine and other illicit drugs, there weren't even enough lawyers responding to an anonymous survey to have a clinically significant finding.
Oh, really?
Because lawyers are so stigmatized about something illegal, they could lose their ticket,
Right.
that they're not even going to respond anonymously, where alcohol use is legal, it's more accepted. So that was easier.
So let's talk about that. It's obviously a gigantic problem that's out there. What, if anything, is being done to address it? You're writing this book.
Well, the study came out first. The Betty Ford ABA Hazelton study came out, which told us about the problem. Now, the ABA has just released a task force report. We were talking about this. That is very extensive, that has all these recommendations. So there are things being done. There was a New York Times article that came out, The Lawyer, the Addict.
Yeah.
Awareness is slowly being created. So how are we going to implement strategies to take it from awareness to recovery? And that is a good question. Law firms need to get involved, big, small. Bar associations need to get involved because the majority of lawyers are not in law firms, right? They're solo practitioners, or even really small firms.
Right. So they don't have the infrastructure.
So they don't have the infrastructure, and they don't have the stopgaps for someone to say, hey, something's going on here.
Right.
A lot of social isolation within small firms, solo practitioners. We have to implement procedures. And we need the legal assistance programs to get involved. We need law schools to get involved, because a lot of this starts in law school. Addicted law students become addicted lawyers. A study came out a long time ago that found that law students tend to come into the law school relatively mentally healthy, but they come out worse than they were.
I think that's going to surprise anybody, yeah.
But where that really fits in is that we all bring our baggage to the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're lawyers, we bring our childhood baggage, we bring our home baggage, we bring our mental health baggage. So a law student walking into law school that may have unresolved mental health issues, even though they may feel like they're on a level playing ground, those issues can be triggered by stress. Those issues can be triggered into drinking as a way of dealing with stress. And the same thing happens with lawyers. We bring our baggage to the game. Lawyers are people too. Let me give you an example. I talk to lawyers all the time, and all they want to talk about is, okay, I'm going to get sober. I need to do this. I need to work on my, I need to repair my relationship at home. I don't want to lose clients. I just need to string together sobriety.
Yeah.
That is right. We need to deal with where we are, right?
Right.
For me, I had to get sober to deal with all the other stuff. And I start asking questions. And I don't ask questions about drinking or drug use. I ask questions about family. I tell them about my family. I ask them about their relationships at home. I ask them about growing up. I've had lawyers tell me about sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse at home, mental abuse, childhood abuse. Now, I am not a counselor. I say we need to refer you to people who deal with that. But the point is, they say, I've dealt with that. I've dealt with that. I've dealt with that.
But they haven't.
But they haven't.
Right.
But they haven't. They compartmentalize it because they don't want to allow themselves to be vulnerable.
So if I hear you correctly, it's the chicken and the egg, which is kind of one of the questions I wanted to ask you. Is there something about the law that attracts addictive personalities, and that's why we see these high numbers? Or is it the other way around, that there's something about practicing the law that turns people into these addictive personalities?
Lawyers as a profession, I do not believe, are predisposed to addiction.
Okay.
Because that would get into genetics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. Genetics is what predisposes us. So we know that as a profession, it doesn't work that way. Does the profession attract a personality type that can be more easily triggered into drinking, drug use? Sure, we're type A personalities. You work hard. You may not have healthy ways of dealing with stress.
Yeah.
And the legal profession is not a profession that provides healthy ways of dealing with stress.
It's a drinking culture, isn't it?
It's a drinking culture. It's a drinking culture that starts in law school.
That's how you network.
When I was going to Pitt Law in 1986, we had beer keggers right in the student lounge.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going on now, but that's a drinking culture. I mean, call me, I'll just spitball here that's a drinking culture.
Sally's been there more recently than I have. Sally's, that's the whole thing?
Yeah, I'm also in the Chicago Bar Association does a show every year, and it's called Christmas Spirits for a reason. It is more drinking, less performing, I would say.
That's right. And that is not to say...
I'm just kidding, not really.
No, I mean, this is an issue. This is an issue. It's with a lot of bar associations, although I think bar associations are starting to reevaluate that approach. We can't cater to a profession in terms of, okay, if you don't have a problem drinking, you're just, everyone has a problem. Everyone is a problem drinker. Everyone is not a problem drinker. But we can recognize that as a profession, we can take steps that there are other alternatives for people who don't drink.
What do you mean?
Well, I see bar associations now doing rock climbing.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Law firms want to have their holiday party. Are we offering the appropriate alternatives for non-drinkers? Are we empowering people who have, who don't want to be in that, people who are are we empowering people who are in recovery to not feel shame to attend these events?
That's really interesting. I know a lot of big, I never even thought about that, but Christmas parties are really just an alcohol-centric activity. That's what everyone thinks of as soon as...
I mean, that's the best part about them.
Yeah, usually, right, for some people. But I didn't even think about there are people out there that will probably feel ostracized if they don't partake.
They feel ostracized, and it is a major stress factor. I have lawyers tell me that is one of the most stressful times of a year. I do not want to go to this event, but I have to go to this event. Everyone's going to be drinking at this event. If I don't drink at this event, will people think something differently of me? Will people bring it up? Then will I have to tell them I am in recovery? It becomes this stressful, stigmatized chain of thought.
Let's talk about that, the stigma that's attached to this. One of the things we were talking about before the pod got going today was that a lot of law firms aren't really dealing with this because there's a stigma not only attached to the lawyers as individuals, but if a law firm comes out and says, we're going to address this problem because it is a problem at our firm, that they may be afraid that clients flee, that it affects their good name and image, that kind of thing. What can be done about that? How do you convince law firms? That's a little easier for bar associations, right? But how do you convince law firms, where a lot of lawyers are, big, medium-sized firms, to address an issue like that when they have those concerns?
Okay, well, let's give the context of this. There was a Wall Street Journal study that came out where it talked about how some bigger law firms were actually putting counselors on retainer, okay, to help lawyers who
in-house,
yeah, or just bringing them in,
okay,
to deal with lawyers who may have mental health issues, who may want help, and there was one, I'm not going to call the guy out, but said, we don't want to do that. It was a managing partner firm. We don't want to do that because people will think our lawyers are quote unquote crazy.
Okay.
So if we do anything to help,
right,
people will think our lawyers have a problem.
Acknowledging the problem.
That's
the problem
right.
itself.
So we're thinking about it from the back end forwards.
Right.
How about taking the steps so our lawyers have fewer problems? One of the things we talked about that I feel law firms should consider are mental health panels. If you have a law firm that's big enough, say medium to size law firms, a mental health committee that meets twice a year that talks about how things are going from a mental health standpoint and how we can better empower lawyers within the firm to do better and to seek help that also encompasses wellness. Mm-hmm. What is so hard about that? Why is that such a problem?
Are you finding at all, though, that right now we're living in a time where mindfulness and wellness is kind of on the forefront, especially for millennials? Are you finding at all that law firms, which are traditionally very, male-led and
I don't know what
maybe
you're talking
not
about.
quite
What?
as open
What?
as other cultures like social media cultures, to have this kind of wellness program installed? Are you finding that there is a little trickle of that?
Yes, and we also, you bring up a great point about wellness. I am a big fan of wellness. I'm a big fan of mindfulness, and I'm a big fan of anything that supports a recovery program in that way. We have to distinguish between wellness as a recovery support and wellness as an excuse not to deal with addiction. Okay.
What do you mean?
I see people talking about wellness and they bootstrap on addiction. Well, we have all these addiction stats, these problem drinking stats. Hey, wellness.
Yeah.
What we don't want are lawyers who may be dealing with a problem drinking issue, a drug issue, to say, if I just meditate, that's going to be everything I need to do. If I just start running, that's going to be everything I need to do. No. We have to have baseline recovery issues, baseline recovery procedures, and then when you move into recovery, wellness becomes part of that. So my issue with wellness is that it's taking on this all-encompassing type aura where we really need to focus first on helping people get sober if they're dealing with that, helping people deal with the depression. Do we need to be on antidepressants? Do they need to be getting psychiatric help?
Yeah.
That is different than wellness.
There's also a preventative aspect, though, to it for people who have not yet gotten to that point.
That's right. That's right. And wellness is great for that. So my issue with wellness is when we confuse things. Mm-hmm. There's wellness for people who just want to have a better mental health outlook, who may have no issues whatsoever. There's wellness for people in recovery who want to have a healthier recovery. Wellness is not a baseline treatment for addiction.
Mm-hmm. There's Nicole, somebody who helped us prepare for this podcast today. In her law school experience, she did have a class about alcoholism and certain addictions in the legal world. I don't know if you know this, Brian, but Illinois actually just implemented a requirement that 1 hour of our continuing legal education has to be around. I don't really know the specifics yet.
No one does.
It's new.
No one does.
But it is something, 1 hour of our requirements that we report every 2 years.
That's great. And I know the ABA has recommended that every state adopt that. Mm. So I think that's a good thing. And I think that's a great first step. But again, I don't want people to think I'm anti-wellness. I just believe that wellness should be placed in the proper categories within law firms, within recovery.
You don't want this to get lost in kind of a lot of the white noise of wellness.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Bringing in fruit once a week to a law firm isn't going to.
That's right. Addiction. And yoga is great.
Right.
Meditation is great. But let's be sure it's within its proper perspective.
It's a good point. It's probably also a good time to take a break. We'll be right back.
Need a lawyer? Steve?
I do.
You look like you need a lawyer. The Chicago Bar Association Lawyer Referral Service has been making referrals for over 70 years to attorneys who have been thoroughly screened for experience in over 40 different areas of the law. Call 312-554-2001 or visit us online at www.chicagobar.org/LRS.
So, Brian, one of the things that we mentioned in the last segment was the drinking culture that exists in the law, not only in law school, but in the practice of law, especially for young lawyers. Can you tell us more about that? What have your experiences been?
Yes, the drinking culture for me my drinking culture started at Penn State. We have to remember I was a quote-unquote alcoholic by my sophomore year at Penn State.
Sophomore year undergrad.
Yeah, sophomore year undergrad. Yeah. So I was already drinking heavily at Penn State. I was bulimic, dealing with that. I was exercise bulimic, which is the compulsive exercise for the sole purpose of offsetting calories, running 20 miles a day. So I was bringing all of that to Pitt Law. And it's important to understand that the only reason I went to law school was that I could repeat the same behaviors that I did at Penn State and not have to show them to anyone.
You mean just because you stayed in school?
To stay in school. That is
the path of least resistance.
The path of least resistance. That is the only reason I went to law school. That's it. No other reason. And so I walked through the doors of Pitt Law with that already under my belt.
Okay.
So when you walk through the doors of and into a drinking culture, it was perfect. Every other night's a different bar. The law student's going to a different bar, although they knew how to, the ones who weren't problem drinkers knew how to prioritize things.
Right.
When I wasn't doing that, I was back in my apartment binge drinking a bottle of tequila just to be able to walk out of the house. There were, again, the happy hours within the law school lounge where we had the keggers right in the law school lounge.
Yep.
So
Sounds familiar.
you have the people like me who already had issues and could be easily triggered into issues. You have the other law students who they can have a good time and move on. But then you have the other law students who may not have those issues, but all of a sudden they are learning to drink as a way of dealing with stress.
Right.
And they may have experimented with alcohol before as a teen or in college. But in law school, we are really now socializing to drink as a way of dealing with stress. And back then, there was really nothing else. We did not have legal lawyer assistance programs of any type back in the 80s, let alone ones that also cater to law students, which many states do, but some don't. So we did not have awareness of counseling. There really wasn't an awareness of 12-step. Alcoholics Anonymous is the biggest one. In my day, for a law student who was a problem drinker, who a quote-unquote alcoholic, you were either not in recovery, you were in a 12-step program, or you were in a hospital. That was it. We didn't have residential treatment. We didn't have this awareness where students were talking to each other, deans of students who were aware. That has changed, but has the drinking culture changed? I think we are stepping back from that. But once you become an alcoholic law student, a law student who is now culturalized to deal with problems by drinking,
Right.
you are going to take that boom right into the legal profession.
Where it's incredibly useful for business generation, networking.
Absolutely. Where you are now networking, where now it may be encouraged as a way of bonding.
Absolutely.
My question is, I'm sorry to interrupt, but men versus women, you were saying also this ties into an eating disorder that you also had. Did you find that, I imagine that a woman experiencing a lot of this stuff would probably be recognized a little bit faster than a man going through all of this stuff. And so did you ever notice this in women versus men, or how did that kind of...
Are you talking about alcohol or the eating disorder?
Everything, because I imagine one kind of rolls into the other sometimes. But let's talk about alcohol since that's the theme.
The ABA study found that there were some different demographic groups where men and women drank differently. But from an anecdotal standpoint, I mean, all I eventually hung around with were other lawyers and other non-lawyers who were drinking, dealing drugs, and doing coke.
Right.
So it wasn't like I was making those distinctions while I was not in recovery. As somebody in recovery, I do believe that we deal with I do believe that there are different ways of dealing with how we express ourselves in terms of alcohol, in terms of addiction. But again, I'm not a clinician, and my observations would be more anecdotal than something that is study-based. I think the ABA Hazleton study really goes into that and how the different sexes in different demographic and age groups, the problem drinking rates.
Did your friends or family ever say, hey, do you think you have a problem, or did you just avoid them?
You
Your brother Mark's known for being a pretty blunt guy.
Well, you have to remember, that's a great question. The first, when it came to head, was in the summer of 2005, when all this came to a head, when I became suicidal, when I believed in my heart that I was doing my family a favor to end my life, that I saw nothing but a black hole in my future. I saw no career as a lawyer, a career I never wanted in the first place. I saw that no relationships. I'd already been divorced 3 times, all failing as a result of drugs and alcohol. I saw nothing of value in my future.
So what changed?
I bought a weapon. And I put that weapon on my nightstand, and somebody fortunately alerted my family. And my 2 brothers showed up at my house, and I had that .45 automatic on my nightstand. There was cocaine everywhere. There were alcohol bottles everywhere. There was Xanax lined out all over the place. I was into the black market Xanax. That was when it really became evident that there was a problem. And that was my first of 2 trips to a psychiatric facility. Before that, I had really distanced. I had distanced into the people who did drugs, the people who drank, the people who party all the time. And during that time, I went from a lawyer making 6 figures, which in my mind was the marker of success, money, because money allowed me to buy more drugs.
Right.
Money allowed me to party. I was always broke because I was spending all my money on cocaine and drugs and cocaine and alcohol. And so I went during that period up to the point where they came in my house with that weapon. I had gone from a successful lawyer to having no clients at all. None.
Really?
All of them failing. I was doing cocaine in the bathroom of the law firm I was of counsel to. I was doing cocaine to be able to walk into a courtroom. I was high in courtrooms. I was taking cases I shouldn't have taken because I needed that money. We were joking, and remember I said, as I said earlier, it wasn't, I still have my license, but it wasn't for a lack of trying to lose it.
Yeah, I kind of.
And I did many things that crossed the line.
Mm-hmm.
In your mind, was there a point, like can you pinpoint exactly the time where it went from sort of gray to just all black? Or
Yes, and that was in 2005. That was the summer of 2005. And that would segue into a conversation about suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had, lawyers have a very high suicide rate. And as I think back on that, and I even ordered my psychiatric notes from Green Oak Psychiatric Facility. I ordered from 2 reasons. One, as a lawyer, in case someone said that never happened. Okay. I wanted to be able to say, here's the psychiatric notes, both my brothers in the room.
Yeah.
So you're wrong. 2, it was such a fog that I wanted to be able to look back at it and see what I was really thinking. See what was said in the room. There was a lot of blame on my family. Of course, it wasn't their fault. There was a lot of blame on my brother, Mark. Of course, it wasn't his fault. There was a lot of talk about having to live in his shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't his fault. His success is wonderful. There's another, we can talk about that too, what I call name fame. When someone has no identity of their own, I hated myself so much, it became easier when Mark became famous to be Mark Cuban's brother, rather than to be someone I despise when I look in the mirror. I could be Mark Cuban's brother and date girls half my age. Every relationship based on cocaine, of course.
Oh, so you could just leverage that relationship to feed the addiction.
Absolutely. It was easier to be that. It was easier to be this fake love, this fake adulation that had nothing to do with me, to get this love that I wanted so badly from my mother, from my family, to love myself, this artificial love that wasn't real, but I could walk into nightclubs. Everyone loved me. People put cocaine in my pockets. Everyone loved me.
Yeah.
I was, 45, girls in their 20s. Everyone loved me. And so why not be that? Instead of being Brian, instead of exploring that Brian who was hurt so badly because he didn't think he was loved as a child. Much easier just to fill the void with fake love.
So summer 2005, that was the turning point?
That was the darkest. And that was when it just went like that. I went from a fog into a suicidal state.
And you don't know why. You can't pinpoint exactly.
It just happens that fast.
Yeah.
It happens that fast. And when we talk about suicide, that is one of the things I'm always careful about. And it always just breaks my heart when people talk about selfishness. It's selfish. It's a selfish act. I thought I didn't think in terms of selfish. In my mind, it was perfectly logical to me that I was doing my family a favor. It was not selfish. It was an act of love to take my life.
I get that. I just don't know why people have to do it by jumping in front of the train in the morning and ruining everybody's commute.
If I don't, is that a serious question?
No, I'm just kidding.
Just trying to lighten it up a little bit. Go ahead.
So talk about suicide. We have to be, I try to be really careful about that because it was a fog that my mind just switched over just like that. That was not even my quote unquote rock bottom.
What was?
My rock bottom was, and I really hate that term, I prefer recovery tipping point, because rock bottom has become this term that we assume you have to experience the worst in your life to recover, which is exactly what I try to get lawyers and law students to realize we don't have to do when I say today is as good as it's ever going to get, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to wait for quote unquote rock bottom to come. I had started dating this girl, Amanda, in 2006, right around Dallas Mavericks cocaine tickets time. I met her while I was at the end of a week-long cocaine binge celebration of my birthday, which was very normal for me. You know, every birthday celebration was just a week-long binge, drug and alcohol binge.
Yeah.
And as usual, I was able to pull it together for enough time to make it seem like I was just this normal lawyer. Everything's great. But eventually, in addiction, those worlds do come crashing together.
Right.
And so we start dating. She moved in with me. April 2007, she went away for a weekend to Houston. Next thing I know, it's 2 days later. I'm lying in bed. There's cocaine spread out all over the dresser. There's Xanax on the dresser. There's alcohol bottles everywhere. She's looking down at me. What's going on here? Trying to process the scene. I had a 2-day drug and alcohol-induced blackout. And of course, as a lawyer, I'm thinking, what lies can I tell to get out of this? You know, I'm going through every permutation of something that I can say that will deflect away from this scene that there's no way to get out of, right?
And she had no idea.
She had no idea. So I decided I needed time to think of a better lie. So I said, okay, we're going to go back to Green Oak Psychiatric Facility. She didn't even know about the first time. I said, let's go here. I need help, figuring that would mollify her.
Okay.
So we're standing in the parking lot of Green Oak Psychiatric Facility waiting for another psychiatric intake. And a few things occurred to me. One, there wouldn't be a third trip back because I'd be dead. Two, it occurred to me that she was gone. I'd go too, right? She's crying, she's hurt, she's angry. Amanda actually stood by me, and we dated for over 10 years while I found recovery, built recovery, rebuilt the trust that I had destroyed. And I had to recover for me, not for her, because without recovery, whether she goes or stays, you're still in trouble.
Sure.
And she stood by me, and we got married last October.
That's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thanks. So relationships can survive that.
Yeah.
But it takes work. And I realized early on it had to happen for me, not for her. Let me give you an example of the microcosm of what I realized. She had just moved in with me, so now she's moving out. Okay, that same night, she's gone. She's moved. Yeah. We'll go to a hotel. She's going to move out the next day. I could have put my head in the sand and allowed her to move out and not played any part of it and just said, go. I helped her move out, and I looked her in the eye and I helped her move out because I knew if I didn't take ownership right there, I would never see her again. And it would be a detriment to moving forward in recovery. So as much as it hurt, as much as I was just racked with guilt and knew that she was hurting and she was just devastated and betrayed, every piece of furniture to her car, I was there. And I believe that was a big part of her staying.
Do you think kind of showing her all of your cards at that moment in time was something that kept you accountable for the rest of your actions?
I think in the end it did, but I didn't look at it that way at the time. Mm-hmm. I showed her all my cards because there was just no way out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, she had walked in with it all right there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we call an orgy of evidence, right?
Every lawyer would love that.
Yes. So there was really no way around that, taking responsibility for that. But I had to take responsibility for me. Yeah. I had to take responsibility in my recovery. So helping her move out, knowing that I may never see her again, she clearly hadn't made a decision at that point. And I would guess at that point, her mindset was probably, no, it's not happening. Mm-hmm. But that was important, to take ownership of what I did and of my first step in recovery right there.
So you've said a couple of times as we've been talking about recovery, you used the phrase, today's as good as it gets.
That's right. But let me, I want to finish the thought. Do we have time?
Yeah, of course.
I want to finish the thought because the third thought in that parking lot was that I was going to lose my family.
And that hadn't occurred to you before? You said you were keeping your distance from them already.
That hadn't occurred to me before that time because families may love us unconditionally, But there are probably going to be limits on there, and we hope they do love us unconditionally. Some families don't have that. There are probably going to be limits on a family's willingness to watch somebody they love destroy their lives and kill themselves if they're not going to at least try to recover, take that first step. Right. And I knew I had reached that point. As a funny aside, my father, our father, Mark, Jeff, and I, 91 years old, a veteran of the Pacific, a veteran of Korean War. He and his older brother, Marty, my father was the middle of three boys, like I'm the middle of three boys. He and his older brother, Marty, fixed cars in the same place in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, from the end of the Korean War till his older brother died in 1999. Now, it was like a bad marriage sometimes, two brothers working together.
Strong bond,
but
though.
It was that bond of brothers, the three boys, and he constantly tried to instill that bond in Mark, Jeff, and I growing up. He'd say, guys, he'd go Mark, Brian, Jeff, or he'd get our names wrong and go Jeff, Brian, Mark. Don't worry about it, Dad.
My parents do that.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it, Dad. We get it.
What's your name?
One time my mom called me by my dog's name.
Yeah,
so,
He'd say, wives may come and go. Well, for me, they certainly have, but he's kidding, right? He's kidding. He'd say, girlfriends may come and go. Being tongue-in-cheek, we hope you have great relationships. But when push comes to shove, all you have is each other. So no matter where you go in life, no matter where your travels take you, you pick up that phone and you tell your brother you love him. You ask your brother if there's anything you could do for him. This was what his parents instilled in him with his brothers, and he was passing this gift on to us. I thought about that gift in that parking lot, and I couldn't lose that. And if you want to know how that gift stuck, all these decades later, in Dallas, Texas, 1,200 miles from where we grew up, Mark, Jeff, my father, and I all live walking distance from each other. That's no accident. That's the bond that my father instilled in us that I was unwilling to lose, and that was my tipping point to begin my recovery.
And now that relationship is recovered as you've recovered.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That third realization that you made, was there ever a listener that's kind of hearing this maybe apply to their own life story might be interested to know if that was ever articulated to you? Was there ever a threat? You will not see us again if, or was this something you knew you were approaching naturally?
My younger brother, Jeff, told somebody who told me, so this is just hearsay, that if I ever used cocaine again, I would never see him again. Now, again, that's hearsay.
Yeah.
Jeff's never said that he said that, but here's what I do know. I had stopped going to events to see my nephews. I had stopped going to dinner with my family. They had stopped asking me to a lot of events. I wouldn't want me all coked up around my family. I don't blame them.
This was out of shame, embarrassment?
For me? No, it's for me. Well, now they know from 2005. Now my family knows that I have an issue.
Right.
My logical solution was to distance myself from my family. So I didn't have to put it in front of them again and only I'd hung out with other lawyers who did drugs, other non-lawyers. Some of them are dead now. Some of them are in prison. You know, this is part of addiction, not just in the legal profession, all around the world.
And these problems landed you in jail once, didn't
Yes.
they? Tell us about that.
Oh, that was fun. Yes. Summer 1990, after my first divorce, out drinking peach schnapps or whatever it was, tooling up the highway, 75 miles an hour. A state trooper pulls in behind me, maybe a half block from my house. So of course I
Can't do the alphabet backward at that point.
You know what?
I can't do that
you
sober,
thought you
by
passed.
the way.
I thought I passed. I thought I did great.
You said
Of
that.
course, I break the first rule. You tell everyone, don't blow. Shut up.
Right.
And this was before laws had changed. Back then, it was 0.10.
Okay.
So it was this 65-year-old state trooper, and he was as nice as can be. We're heading back down to what's called Sterrett Justice Center. He's like, sorry, dude, you didn't pass that test.
No.
You may think you touched your nose. And so he pulled aside when I said the handcuffs were too tight to let me off, to loosen my cuffs. And in the car, I'm so convinced that I'm not intoxicated. When I passed the breathalyzer, or are you going to take me back to my car? He's like, dude, you're not going to pass. But yeah, on that miracle, if you do, somebody will take you back to your car. So we get down to Sterrett Justice Center. And at the time I was wearing a dangling earring for my left ear.
Wow.
I also had a problem.
Rockstar.
Yeah.
I also had a problem with steroid addiction, which is another issue that I don't talk about, in the context of this book.
Sure.
But I was also addicted to steroids, and I was huge. So I was wearing this short little muscle shirt thing. I had a earring dangling from my ear. Here,
Wow.
I'm arrested for DWI. And instead at that time, I don't know if that's how it is now, thank goodness, but it's this assembly line of deputy sheriffs where you're fingerprinting, and it's an assembly line of verbal abuse, okay? They are swearing at everyone. They are humiliating everyone. So this one deputy sheriff gets a millimeter from my nose, and he goes, "You're a stinking lawyer? What's this earring? You stink. You're a loser. You're a disgrace to the profession." And I remember thinking, I earned this. This is my punishment. I earned this. And so into the drunk tank, thinking, this is where my life is going. I'm a mess.
Yeah.
The short-term awareness. And I'm sitting in the drunk tank, and there are kids crying, and everything. And
As beautiful and fresh as can be
oh
imagined.
man, it smells like urine, and it's disgusting. And so I make bail, and my buddy picks me up, and it's funny. I remember a story from the arraignment. The arraignments are on video. I remember a story from the arraignment. I'm sitting there I was crying, and there's this one guy who's screaming, he's rah, rah, rah. And the deputy sheriff goes, "Dude, if you don't sit down and keep quiet, we're going to put you back in the drunk tank, and you'll have to go wait for the next cycle. Wait for the next arraignment." The guy sits there, looks around, rah, 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 and they just come and bear hug him and haul him out. I remember that like it's yesterday. But in any
So you felt super safe in that environment.
and this was 1990, so this was 15 years before
your recovery even
well,
started.
no, that's 17 years before my
Right.
recovery, but 15 years before I became suicidal.
Yeah.
So the next day, called my father crying, called my brothers crying. The advice was just not talk of recovery or anything, because really no one knew I had a problem. I didn't think I had a problem. I was just out drinking like everyone drinks. The culture of the profession, right?
Right.
I made a mistake.
Yeah.
That was my view.
And DUIs were pretty common back then.
I don't know, but it certainly, there was shame, there was embarrassment. And the next day, I was a litigation manager for an insurance company. I walk in, I tell my boss, think I'm going to get fired. He's like, "Just get a good lawyer."
Yeah.
That was it.
You said everyone makes mistakes. Your brother said the same thing, right? So
No, my brothers just said, "You effed up, get a good lawyer."
Yeah.
And that was it. That was the discussion. There was no talk of anything.
Right.
And
So what would you say to a listener right now this is kind of like percolating, and they're hearing things that might be sort of familiar in their own lives, who are not going to go just check themselves in somewhere, or going to go to their first AA meeting? What's that first baby step for self-care that you could start maybe?
am I ingesting something, alcohol or whatever, that is affecting my life on a personal level, on a social level, on a professional level? Can you look at yourself and say you are performing at a high level, at the highest level you could? Ask yourself that first. That's the first step. Because whether you're a lawyer or a law student, the first step always has to be recognizing you have an issue. And so can you get to a place of self-awareness and say, look, I am not doing as well as I could be. We don't have to get to the stage of saying I'm an alcoholic or I have a drug problem. How's my marriage?
Mm-hmm.
How's my family relationships? How's my work?
Yeah.
Why don't we start with that? And then if you can look at yourself and say things could be better, then we can say how much better. And then maybe we can get to a place of saying, okay, there really is a serious drinking issue. Maybe it's an issue of harm reduction where you're not an alcoholic, quote unquote alcoholic, but you could be drinking less. There's a wide range of drinking issues, that we can be on the scale of, that may not necessarily be something that puts you into residential treatment,
Right.
or you have to go into Alcoholics Anonymous or another 12-step type of 12-step. That's only one of them.
Yeah.
So having an honest look in the mirror and just say, how am I doing? How is this relationship? How is that relationship? Isn't that a good first start?
It sounds like wisdom to me, and also probably a good place to take a break. We'll be right back.
This episode of At the Bar is brought to you by CBA Insurance Agency in partnership with Attorney Protective, part of the Berkshire Hathaway family, offering legal malpractice insurance. Attorney Protective has the experience, expertise, and financial stability to defend the strongest cases without limitation. It's your good name. Let us help you keep it. For a free price estimate, visit attorneyprotective.com/CBA podcast.
All right, so Brian, we left off before at a place where our listeners may be able to look themselves in the mirror and reach some point of recognition. If they get there, if they're looking in the mirror and they answer those questions a certain way, what are their treatment options? What's out there?
If you feel you were at a point where support is definitely needed to get help, there are quite a few options. One of the great places to start is the Lawyer's Assistance Program. They are experts in this. They know what the resources are available. They can help you begin that journey.
Tell our listeners who don't know, what's the LAP about? What do they do?
The Lawyer's Assistance Program is there to help lawyers, not with just drinking issues or drug issues, but a wide variety of mental health issues. One of the problems we have in the legal profession is there is this systematic, stigmatized belief that the Lawyer's Assistance Program, whether it's TLAP here or Illinois Lawyer's Assistance Program here, is an arm of the state bar.
Right.
And there is this fear that if people go to the Lawyer's Assistance Program, it's automatically going to get to the state bar. That is not correct. Now, if the state bar, if they're in trouble for something, if there's a disciplinary issue and they are sent to the legal assistance program by the state bar, yes, there are reports made. But if you go to them on their own, no, the conversations are protected by statute. To show you how stigmatized this is in the face of logic, last year I gave a presentation to a Dallas Bar Association event, and it was a bunch of seasoned litigators. After the presentation, one of the lawyers comes up to me and goes, "Brian, I know what you're saying. Yeah. It's not confidential. State bar is going to find out." "How do you know that?" Another lawyer told me. "Well, how does he know that?" "Well, I think another lawyer told him." You are a seasoned trial lawyer, and you're coming to me with
hearsay.
You're coming to me with a guy told a guy who told a guy.
Yeah, but he's got a guy.
So you're coming to me with triple hearsay, something you wouldn't dream of walking into a courtroom with, right? As fact. He laughs and he goes, "Yeah, I know, but it's not confidential." That is how overpowering the stigma is around seeking help with the legal assistance programs. Now that we are breaking through that stigma with the help of the legal assistance programs, with the help of the state bar, with the help people getting out there talking about legal assistance programs, that is a great place to start. If you are in a small to large or a mid-sized to large firm, you may in fact or probably do have an employees assistance program.
Right.
They are also confidential. You can go to the Employees Assistance Program. I know some bigger law firms I know are starting to experience with point lawyers.
What are those?
Those are lawyers who may be in recovery, who somebody can go to without fear of reprisal and let them know what's going on.
Okay.
And are trying to educate the people in the firm that this is how you can come to this person. That is something. There's as far as actual recovery modalities, there's 12-step. That's how I got sober. I am also in psychiatric counseling to deal with how I got there, right? 12-step is dealing with the alcohol and drugs, how I got there, all the mental health issues leading up to that. I am in psychiatric counseling today. No shame in that. I take antidepressants, medications today. I find no shame in that. If 12 steps not your thing, you're just turned off by whatever, there is what is known as smart recovery, which is based on behavior modification. It is much different than 12-step.
Okay.
If religious faith is a big part of your recovery, we have Celebrate Recovery, which is 12-step based, which is a Christian 12-step. There is Holistic Recovery, which is more of a wellness-based type recovery. I have recently been made aware of Refuge Recovery, which is Buddhist. There is a way to begin recovery for almost any personality now. We did not have that when I was first going through this. Like I said, you were either in 12-step, you were in a hospital, or you weren't in recovery. That is not the case today. There are many different paths we can take.
Do you know the contact information for the LAP or a website?
I think you can go to the American Bar Association website, and they have the contact information for every legal assistance program in the state.
Oh, that's great. So, that's a good resource. So tell us a little bit about where you are right now. What are you doing with your life now?
Right now, well, The Addicted Lawyer just came out 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And so it's been an interesting journey since I wrote it. It was a journey of over 2 years to write it. So, and then while I was writing it, the Bar Association study came out. So that was fortuitous.
Yeah, great timing.
I didn't know it was coming out.
Yeah.
And so then the New York Times article came out, The Lawyer, the Addict, which I was mentioned and the book was mentioned. Yeah. And since that happened, it's really been kind of a whirlwind where I've been approached by a lot of bar associations, not so much law schools, but a lot of bar associations, a lot of legal assistance programs. What I love to do is share my journey. So I write for Above the Law, the Addicted Lawyer column.
Yeah, I read that.
Starting to formulate my next book, and I speak. I speak to anyone who asks me to speak. 2 days before this, I was in Miami speaking to the Cuban American Bar Association.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. That's right. That was a great pun, though, when I opened up to say, let me get the elephant out of the room. I am a Cuban, but I'm not Cuban.
Right.
Okay. So they love that. But I've always wanted to say that, so it was a great place to say it. That's what I do. I speak, I write, and I just try to pay it forward. I try to do the next right thing. I get asked, do you regret anything?
Do you?
I don't regret the journey, because the journey got me here talking to everyone here alive, sharing my story. I regret the collateral damage. I regret the ex-wives that I hurt. I regret the family that I hurt. I regret all the people that I hurt along the way. But I can't engage in revisionist history and go back and change that. So what I can do is try to help just one person every time I speak. Try to just reach one person that emails me. Try to lay a path for one person who may decide, based on my story, they identify with one thing, whether it's bullying, whether it's family, whether it's recovery, and they say, okay, I'm going to try. Is my redemption for the people I hurt along the way, the collateral damage. That is what I do.
It sounds like you, through your journey, did find your life's purpose.
That is right. My life's purpose, I knew back then, was never to be a lawyer. We are a profession of thinkers. I'm a feeler. I'm a feeler who went into a profession of feelers, helping people.
That little jewel of Zen sounds like a good place to take one more break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Seeking to expand your legal network, sharpen your skills, and obtain free CLE? Unless you plan on being a professional failure, that's probably a good idea. Join the Chicago Bar Association today and connect with lawyers and judges who lead Chicago's legal community. The CBA will help you expand your personal and professional networks while providing practical programs and resources that meet your specific practice needs. New lawyer membership starts at just $82 a year. Learn more at www.chicagobar.org.
And we're back. Before we wrap up today, we're going to play a game we like to call Stranger Than Legal Fiction. Each of us has done a bit of research and found some of the strangest laws on the books in this country of ours. We're going to summarize one of those real laws, make another one up completely, and each of us are going to guess, or see rather, if we can distinguish which one is real and which one is fiction. Everybody ready?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
Well, we'll find out,
I
Brian.
love guessing games.
Yeah?
Let's do it.
All right, I'll go first.
All right.
The law is my husband's favorite law. He's also an attorney. But the first one I'm going to talk about is called the Nunchuck Act, and it is actually an Illinois law. It basically says you are guilty of a Class C misdemeanor if you own nunchucks or any other sort of martial art weapon and do not register it. And you have to register it with like this administrative agency that's been created by Illinois.
Like a FOIA license or something?
Kind of, but I don't think it's quite as stringent.
Yeah.
You know, with Chicago's strict handgun laws, I'm going valid.
Valid.
Yes.
Okay. So let me tell you number 2, and then you'll have to guess.
All right.
That's the game, right? Am I
Yep,
doing
that's the
it
game.
right?
That's the game.
All right. So the second one I'm going to talk about is called the Refrigerator Act. And you are guilty of a Class C misdemeanor if you leave a refrigerator over a certain size outside of your house. Like you throw it out in the garbage or whatever, and you could lease the property, you could own the property, whatever. If you allow there to be a refrigerator outside of your house at any point, you are guilty of a Class C.
Is that a state statute or a county
Both of these
ordinance?
are state statutes.
So we're to decide whether that's made up or not.
Yep. Which one's made up?
I'm thinking that one's made up. I just can't envision the refrigerator police, coming out on a 911 call. I'm going that one's made up.
I'm going to keep it interesting, go the other way, just so we
Okay.
have some friction here. Sally?
430 ILCS 150 /.01 abandoned refrigerator.
Okay. You got it.
I mean, there's good policy reasons behind that. You don't want to
the,
cite
the,
your
the refrigerator police at 911 call.
Yeah.
There's a huge refrigerator out there. Come on out.
Yeah. Officer, my neighbor just violated the abandoned refrigerator.
Yes.
All right.
All right. You guys ready? Round 2. In Massachusetts, it's illegal to manufacture, sell, or possess explosive golf balls. Violators are subject to a $100 fine and up to a year imprisonment. That's option number 1.
Okay.
Option number 2. In Montana, it's illegal to leave your horse tied to a parking meter without feeding it. The meter, not the horse.
I thought the horse. Okay.
I'm going with option number 1 as being made up. I mean, Montana, horses, just sounds legit.
Sally, what do you think?
Isn't there like I don't golf at all, but isn't there some sort of big golf thing in Massachusetts? Some sort of
Big golf thing?
a big golf thing.
Exploding golf ball thing?
Like a golf course?
Like a course.
Like where people
in
play
which
golf?
People
Yeah.
use
And
a
hit the
club
balls?
and hit the baseball into the goalie.
I think they're in most states. Into the what did you say?
Yes.
Goalie?
That's golf, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
yes,
totally
yes.
I
it.
think that one's the right one.
So you think that one's the right one? Ironically, you're correct. Massachusetts General Law, Part 1, Title 20, Chapter 148. No exploding golf balls.
I want to know who exploded a golf ball that somebody
caused-
initially decided, that we need to do that. I think we need some due diligence on
I
this.
do too. We should have brought the committee notes on
The
all these.
original exploding golf ball.
I would like to see that. Maybe
Legislative notes here.
Yep.
Maybe we could check that out for the next pod. Unfortunately, that's going to be our pod for today. I want to thank our guest, Brian Cuban, for joining us. It was a lot of fun. I hope you'll consider joining us again the next time
Absolutely.
you're in
It
town.
was a great
Great.
time.
Thank you. And I also want to thank everybody who makes this machine run, including my co-host today, Sally Przetsky-Steele.
Sally Steele is easier.
Sally Steele.
It's
And alliteration.
a real upgrade
So
from
I can just
Sally
use that from now
Przetsky.
on, right? So
Yeah,
it's
Kind of
Sally
a movie-
Steele's
it's kind of a
It's so
movie
much
name
better.
too, Sally Steele.
Your Honor,
It is.
Sally Steele here.
That
It was
scared me a
amazing.
little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also want to thank Jen Byrne, our executive producer, and our sound crew, Ricardo Islas and Steve Wyrick. Remember, you can follow us and send us comments, questions, episode ideas, or just troll us on Facebook, Insta, and Twitter at CBA at the bar, at CBA at the bar. Please also rate us. Leave us your feedback on iTunes or wherever you download your podcast. It helps us get the word out. Until next time, for all of us here at the CBA, this is John Amarillo, and we'll see you soon at the bar.